When it comes to their retro catalog, Nintendo's been really building up a lot of support on the Switch. While there's a lot of great specific games that are still missing, the actual platform representation has gotten pretty damn good. I mean, we have the NES, SNES, N64, Game Boy Advance, and even Sega Genesis. But one of the older systems that is still missing to this day is the GameCube. This has been one of the most requested systems basically since the Switch launched, and at least at this current rate, it looks like it's probably not going to happen for this particular model, which is something I've seen a lot of people theorize really for years based on what the Switch is capable of power-wise. Now again, while the current Switch does not support GameCube in any form, we are supposedly seeing a new system coming out next year that, who knows, maybe that might open the door for it, not right away when the system releases, but sometime down the line. I am planning on covering everything we learn about Nintendo's upcoming hardware, whether we get some plausible sounding rumors or actual official announcements from Nintendo, so you don't want to miss out on videos about that. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and hit the bell. Now, of course, there has been talks of Nintendo having potentially a new system on the horizon next year, and maybe with that we could see some additional retro support, including GameCube getting opened up on there. But until that happens, I want to talk about some of my favorite ways of getting your old school GameCube hooked up and set up on a modern display, or maybe on a not so modern display, in order to get a cleaned up, better looking image along with some customization options, and just some ways to make the experience a little more smooth in a modern setup. And really the biggest part about this is how you're hooking a GameCube up to a modern display, which there's many options for. There's really two main avenues I want to talk to with this that I've been able to try out personally and hook up and do. And that is making use of a fancier upscaler like the RetroTink 5X Pro, or making use of specialized HDMI adapters meant for the GameCube first and foremost, namely options like the Carby and GCHD. And I want to start by talking about some of those dedicated HDMI out options like the Carby. These are very simple adapters that plug into the back of the GameCube and specifically make use of the digital AV out. One limitation of this is the fact that not all GameCubes actually have a digital AV out. Depending on the model of GameCube you had, you need to have one of the older first generation models that still offered that port. Later on in the GameCube's life cycle, they trimmed down and removed that port in favor of just relying on the traditional AV out, especially because, at least as far as first party support goes, Nintendo stopped making any of the cables that was going to make use of that digital AV. Now, provided that you do have a GameCube that has that port, or you track one down that does, which adds up your costs a little bit to do something like this, you're going to be able to plug in one of these HDMI adapters to that digital AV. In the case of something like the GCHD Mark II, that actually takes up 2 slots going into both the AV and the digital AV, so it can also support multiple pass-through options. And then these adapters have their own HDMI port that you can then plug into a modern display. While adapters like this are not particularly cheap and are designed specifically for use with the GameCube, the simplicity of plug and play using them is wonderful. You basically just have to put it in the back of the system, plug HDMI in, and you're good to go. Now, there are additional customization options you can make use of with them for things like adjusting scan lines, color, the actual size of the image. So you're able to fine-tune this image a little bit if it doesn't look quite right to you when you first hook it up and use it. Now again, one of the limitations of this is that if you don't have an older style GameCube, you're not going to be able to make use of one of these adapters. What you could do, however, is make use of an upscaler. There's a whole bunch of them that you can find on the market, but when it comes to higher quality ones that are focused on things like retro gaming, one of the options I personally really enjoyed using is the RetroTink 5X Pro. This is not cheap by any means, but one of the benefits of something like this versus those GameCube adapters is that it effectively can work for any of your retro systems. It's capable of doing AV in, component in, SCART, and so it's something that acts as a much more general option that you can use for more systems than just GameCube. Now, when it comes to the GameCube in particular, similar to those other adapters, you are better off if you do have the older model available to use with these, because then that enables you to do things like make use of GameCube component cables, which the official ones are extremely expensive and not really something that's worth tracking down at this point. It's easily going to cost you $200 to $300. There are third-party options out there that exist, like from Retrobit. You can also track down a SCART cable for the GameCube, which is more affordable and will still give you that better digital AV out signal. However, if you do have a later edition GameCube and you just want a way to make it work on a modern display, you don't want to go out of your way to buy another GameCube or anything like that, well, you can do AV out of the system into the RetroTink and onto a modern display, which again will not look as good as those other options, but will still result in a good looking image that can display on a modern TV. Similar to those HDMI plugins for the GameCube, there are also a vast number of settings that you can customize using a remote control, way more on the RetroTink in particular, so you can really fine tune the image as much as possible to get something close to what you want it to look like. Again, options like the Carby and the GCHD are simpler and more affordable options. They just require you have that older style GameCube. If, however, you do want something that works with AV, or you want to buy an option that will work for more systems and not just the GameCube specifically, that's where something like the RetroTink is really appealing. Now, the focus of devices like this is again to hook your system up to a modern display, but if you wanted to hook up to an older display, a CRT, and get a better looking image, there's actually a trick I learned recently that you can make use with these devices to get honestly stunning looking gameplay. This was something that I actually learned from Shank Mods. One of the times that we were working together and collaborating was actually when we were doing our GameCube controller videos at the start of the year. And when he saw that we had on our hands one of the old school Apple CRTs, he showed us a neat little trick where we actually took one of the pass-throughs, the Carby in particular, did the digital AV out into HDMI, and then ran HDMI into an adapter cable where we basically plugged one of those HDMI adapters into the back of the GameCube, and then instead of running HDMI out, we plugged that into an HDMI to VGA converter, plugged that into the back of the CRT, and I gotta say, it's the best looking way I've ever experienced GameCube games. While there is absolutely something to be said for the option of being able to take a retro system and put it on a modern display for the simplicity and having this kind of, single living room setup that's able to support both modern systems and older systems, there's just something that is ultimately lost compared to the experience of playing it on a traditional CRT the way the game was originally envisioned. The colors and the crispness of the image just come together in a way where this really is the way that these games were originally meant to be seen, and I cannot get over how amazing of an experience it's been. So much so that while I still like having the option of hooking up a GameCube to a modern display to keep things simple, we now run a dedicated setup for this so that we can just play GameCube games this way because it is just gorgeous. Now, alongside finding ways of hooking up your system visually for things, another important part of the experience of playing on the system today is the controller you use. Now, obviously, one of the best options out there is just to stick with an OEM GameCube controller, but finding one that's still in pretty good condition. I mean, there's obviously the original controllers that came out when the system first launched, but the problem with that is tracking one down in good condition if you don't already have one. Nintendo isn't exactly still making OEM GameCube controllers. There was, of course, the ones that released back when the system first came out, and then Nintendo did do another run of Smash Brothers themed ones when they released the adapter that was made for the Wii U. But since then, they haven't been actively making any more, and so finding either of these in good condition at a fair price can get pretty difficult. Not to mention the fact of the peace of mind of whether or not what you're buying is actually going to be in the working condition you hope it is if you're not able to test it out firsthand. And so in my mind, while using an OEM wired option or Wavebird is the way to go if you can track one down that works, if you want something that you can just buy out of the box brand new today that is wireless and will work for the system, the option I like right now is the Battler GC from Retro Fighters. Retro Fighters has been really focused on making lots of retro style controllers, both for modern systems that you can use on things like the Switch, or for using on their original hardware, like in the case of the Battler GC. And while I still prefer OEM, if I'm looking for a third-party option that I can use, that's the one I'm really liking for GameCube. Retro Fighters have made a bunch of different retro style controllers, some that are meant for use on current systems, some that are meant for use on older systems, and the Battler GC is an option they released for a GameCube controller that actually ships with both options available right away. Basically, it's a wireless controller that comes with a pair of dongles right out of the box, one that's USB so you can use that with something like a Switch, and one that is a GameCube style adapter so you can use it on a GameCube. Now, compared to the official option, there are some important differences to keep in mind with this controller versus others. The build quality is solid, not quite as high as OEM, but pretty good as far as third-party controllers go. You get the ABXY layout that is GameCube style, which is a big must for me. You do get a bigger D-pad, which is an upgrade over the official GameCube D-pad that are manufactured brand new. This is the one that I do like for GameCube the most. It's a simple enough list of accessories, but if your goal is to just play the games that you grew up playing and you want to be able to hook them up in a modern display or even just get a little bit extra out of them, these are the options that I really like right now. Just a visual component to get it on modern display or get an even better looking image on a classic CRT, and a controller alternative that, again, OEM should be your first bet, especially if you're able to get your hands on a good condition one, but if that's a fight you're not willing to put up with, or there's just no good solutions out there, a third-party option that gets the job done. So yeah, that's how I've been playing my GameCube these days. Hopefully at some point Nintendo does start bringing a lot more of that library to modern systems. We've seen a small handful of them happen. Wind Waker got a remake on the Wii U. More recently, we got a port of Sunshine on the Switch as well, but that was also a limited time thing because they didn't want to keep selling that game for some reason. Hopefully we see much more of the library come back again, potentially on a next generation system, whether that's the Switch 2 or whatever else Nintendo's working on. But until that happens, if you've got your GameCube games on you right now, or if you don't mind throwing down a lot of money to track down used copies these days, these are the options that will let you experience them again now. I do have links posted down below in the description for everything I talked about in today's video. As always, if you enjoyed it, hit that thumbs up button to let me know, subscribe if you haven't yet, and I will see you guys later.